Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kotaku Split Screen, the podcast where we tackle video games one extremely specific topic at a time. I am one of your hosts, Kotaku senior reporter Nathan Grayson, and I am joined, as always, by Ashley Parrish.
Hey.
And Michael Fahey.
Hello and welcome.
Wow, that was a very streamlined intro for us. Usually something happens that
somebody will flub a line somewhere and it'll all fuck up. You just jinxed it now.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome.
Anyway, so I guess we should just roll right into this week's topic. Mm-hmm. We are talking about, for no reason really in particular, games as a service, which is a concept that has been around for a little bit and that is kind of powering many video games these days, in part because, it makes publishers a lot of money. But I figured it would be an interesting thing to talk about right now because we're kind of in I don't want to say dead zone for new games coming out, but there's just not a lot really happening. There's not a ton on the horizon. A lot of games have been delayed by COVID. So I think a lot of people are playing games that might be more in the service model that have been around for a while and continually update because those games are still chugging along in spite of everything. So with that said, I think we're going to move into our first segment, which is a speed run of the history of service games.
Speedrun.
Where they started, where they are going, maybe even where they'll end up. To begin, I want to know from both of you, what is the first kind of service, live service game that you've played? And also, what do you consider a live service game? What are the components that make a game that, as opposed to just a sporadically updated multiplayer game or whatever?
They make no difference to me, honestly. If I am anything that has a subscription to it, or anything that has is based around seasons that you pay money to participate in, or anything like that is a service game to me. I also think MMOs qualify, at least to me, as service games. We've had this discussion before when we were planning this about if MMOs count or not, but I think they do count. And it doesn't have to be the ones that you continually pay a subscription for. It could be the ones that just are free to play, stuffed with microtransactions for cosmetics and stuff like that. And I think I want to say the first game as a service that I played, does Neopets count?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I'm going to allow it.
And it would be Neopets. I still have a Neopets account that I occasionally log into, only just to see how old my account is. And it's approaching, it has to be somewhere around 19 years now. So I'm quite proud of that. I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it's neat that something on the internet can be around for that long. On the other hand, it does mean that we are all but dust in the wind.
Yeah. I haven't fed my pets in forever and they're starving.
What happens when you don't feed them for a decade or whatever? Does anything change about them, or does it just say hey, you should feed these?
No, they have statuses that I don't know if it's changed because I haven't logged in a year or so, but they have statuses that'll tell you your pet is hungry or peckish or whatever. And if you don't feed them, the status is bright red and it says dying, but they never die. So
what?
My pets have been stuck in this perpetual hell of death without death for 15 years while this got dark.
That is so dark. Oh my God. I didn't even know that I assume that Neopets, like a lot of other kids' properties from those times, didn't acknowledge death. It was just you should eat because eating is a good time for your mouth. I did not realize that they were they can enter a state of near death
and never die. So.
I mean, they were it's kind of the whole concept's kind of based off of Digimon and those little virtual pets, and they just straight up died on you. So
that's true.
So, I mean, now I'm sad about the Neopets, but I also think we're going to just kind of pivot, and the new topic for this is going to be Ash's dying Neopets. We're going to have her log in real time and tell us about the status of...
I am going to log in after this and try to feed them. It's in my mind.
I smell a Kotaku blog in the making. But anyway, Fahey, your first service game.
My first service game, well, I'm going to go ahead and say it, call MMOs service games because, I mean, really they are. Any game that wants that puts a good effort towards getting more money out of you by putting out new content on a relatively regular basis, it's going to be a games as service game. So I'm going to go way back and be I mean, I want to say Ultima. I'd go further back and go Mushes and Moves that I played in the back, but those were all player runs, so they don't count, and there was no money exchanged. It was just gross cyber sex. So instead of the gross cyber sex, yeah, we'll go Ultima Online, EverQuest, any game that goes, hey, you guys want to pay some more money to get some new content? Here, take it. Whether it be monthly or as you wish.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you guys both bring up MMOs because, yeah, I would say they are kind of the point of origin for the idea of like a game as a service. But it's interesting to think about now because back when MMOs first started, content updates were like pretty irregular and often arrived in the form of like expansions, like box expansions that would cost like half as much as the game itself or, somewhere in that ballpark. And so it was the kind of thing where like you would buy the expansion, get that content all at once, and then, play it for however long and then wait for an undetermined amount of time for the next expansion. And that was just kind of how it went. But that also posed a lot of problems for like other kinds of games. For one, like consoles couldn't really do that model because consoles didn't have a ton of hard drive space. So you couldn't just be like, yeah, here's a full box expansion that takes up like 20 gigabytes of hard drive space or whatever. That just didn't really work well. But if we really want to go into like the first service game that kind of like, I would say approximated the modern model, some people would say it's Counter-Strike, which when it hit version 1.0 in the year 2000, which feels like it should be recent, but was in fact 21 years ago. Back when, as according to my brain, that's when the 80s were.
In 2000, yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, they were 20 years ago. But anyway, so yeah, it's maybe the best example of like a forever game. Like Counter-Strike came out, it went into version 1.0 in 2000, but like, even though it has evolved and changed and there have been many different versions of it, it's still roughly from a gameplay perspective, the same game now that it was then, which is pretty wild. But yeah, so here's Rock, Paper, Shotgun on Counter-Strike. They said, Counter-Strike started the live service tradition of using a popular game to force players onto a janky, slow, and unwanted store client. Years before Battlefield 4 or Fortnite, Valve forced players to swap onto their shiny new Steam to continue playing Counter-Strike after the old multiplayer services shut down. Steam sucked. Steam was truly awful for years. I cannot overstate how much I did not want Steam, but if you wanted to play CS or other Half-Life based games, you had to use Steam. So people did, and look at it now. But yeah, so like Counter-Strike, you could say counts, but it didn't really go into like the modern idea of a live service model until later. But yeah, so we had like a bunch of different evolutions happening all at once to bring us to the point of like live service now, because you had MMOs, you had games like Counter-Strike and the launch of services like Steam. And then on consoles, you had 2005 as kind of a very pivotal year because Xbox 360 basically brought us the idea of like DLC as we know it now. Like prior to that, there was expansions and stuff, but Microsoft is like, well, we, again, hard drive space is an issue. We can't really do a bunch of those, but we can do like small little bits of content. And in addition to that, they'll need to be of like a certain price because if they're not, then transaction fees are going to kill us. So did you know, and I didn't know this, and I don't know why it never like clicked in my head. Microsoft coined the term microtransaction. Like, of course they did. Micro is in the name.
Well, yeah, because small, and that's what they're supposed to be. But seriously?
Yep. Yeah, they made that up.
What? It wasn't for a game, was it?
It was just for early DLC on the Xbox 360.
Huh.
Yeah. Which is wild to me. But yeah, so there were all these considerations that they had to make in order for this to work. So like, let's see, back in, this interview was also in 2005, Xbox Live General Manager Cam Ferroni, which is a great name, was talking to Reuters. And they said, generally, if you do anything less than $5, you end up eating the bulk of that $5 in the transaction fees. So this is where like the point system came from. They're like, at the heart of it, it'll be a points-like system where you buy points and then use those points to make purchases. And so part of that was in order to like group currencies together so that you weren't like spending $1 and then actually that entire dollar went into transaction fees. So you're spending $2 to buy $1. People wouldn't have liked that. But put a point system in there and also make the amount of money go up, and the transaction
Right.
fees are different.
Because back then, I think the lowest amount of points you could spend or buy was like 400 or 800.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
AKA
to buy
around $5.
Yeah. Wow. 5 to
Mhm.
10. Yeah.
Good
And
Lord.
so then you also had, let's see, I believe this was a piece written around the same time, but yeah, there was the author of I think, book called Synthetic Worlds, Indiana University professor named Edward Castronova. Another great name. Why does everybody involved in history have really cool names? Anyway, they said, not only do you have to sweep away the distinction between virtual and real, you have to stop looking at video games as a toy and start looking at them as an entertainment service. And that is apparently one of the first times anyone called games as a service. But yeah, so Microsoft introduced Microsoft Points, which also had the side effect of obscuring real money value. So you could, kind of trick yourself into spending more money than maybe you really wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
And now, like, every game uses a point service or multiple currencies instead of using real money. So yeah, we found a cool way to trick people. So not long after that, we got some of the first third-party developers embracing DLC and microtransactions, which led us to Horse Armor, which we talked about in the monetization episode, which was just a great time. But yeah, so people kind of slowly embraced DLC. Again, initially it was pretty controversial because people were like, why the heck would I want to buy armor for my horse? That's stupid. But developers and publishers kept at it. And so then in 2010, EA tried to use it to solve another problem, which I had forgotten about this too, but this is really interesting.
Was it the problem that everyone hated EA?
No. And
Oh.
I mean, they never solved that.
Oh.
But anyway, so the big problem at the time for a lot of big publishers is that they were losing money to used game sales. And so EA launched, and Fahey, you've got to remember this because I'm sure that you blogged about it at some point. Project $10.
Project $10?
Yeah, I remember this as soon as I read the phrase. So the idea was that EA said, okay, well, we need to incentivize people to buy new games instead of used ones. So what if we include a code with new copies of games that gives them roughly $10 worth of additional content?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, I forgot they called it that. But yeah, it's like you buy the game and you get this code for it and you resell the game. You don't have that code. Well, that's really sad. You should buy the new one instead.
Exactly.
Wait, what is this project? I'm not following.
Yeah. So at the time, EA called it Project $10.
Okay.
And the idea was that they would bundle with new copies of a game a code that basically included $10 worth of, fairly minor DLC, but it's still bonus content. And you wouldn't pay extra for it. It would just be part of the new copy of the game.
Okay.
But if you bought it used, someone would have already used that code. So, you're out of luck. It would disincentivize buying used, basically.
I wonder how successful that shit was, because that doesn't sound like, to our modern time brains, that doesn't sound like, okay, you do you, EA. We're just going to continue to go to the local game exchange and buy a bunch of used shit.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly, people didn't like it. I feel like it was...
It did add to, it added code unused to eBay vernacular. So when you were selling a game on eBay, you'd be like, hey, oh, I didn't use the code. Ooh, bonus.
But yeah, so that then evolved into something even worse. That evolved into online passes, which basically meant that you would get a code with a new copy of a game that unlocked your ability to play online at all.
What?
I believe the first game that included that was Tiger Woods PGA Tour 11. And its code unlocked online play.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Yeah. Other games followed suit. The trend was not popular, believe it or not.
Yeah.
People didn't love that. 2010 was then when we got what was at the time a very novel idea, something that sounds really normal to us now. 2010, Rockstar launched the LA Noire Pass. And at the time, it was this crazy concept, which was get people to pay for things that were not out yet and did not exist yet. Which was
This is season passes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah, this was more or less the invention of season passes. Rockstar did it. And so, yeah, the proposition was you either pay $20 for the DLC individually, or 12 for it all at once via the pass.
And that's been wildly popular, hasn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure all the games coming out today, most of them still have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, people don't love it, but it stuck around.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like a lot of games did that in that same year. Mortal Kombat's reboot used a similar season pass type model. Call of Duty had its elite membership for Modern Warfare 3 later that year, which was a $50 subscription that got you all the map packs for that year, some streaming content, a special website. So developers were like trying different things with this idea, saying like, what do we need to give people to get them in the door? So then that was all happening in console world. Concurrent to all of this, in the late 2000s, that's when Facebook games got popular. And they would use like a real money option for people to purchase time savers in games like Farmville. So you could,
Oh, Farmville.
And then you also had mobile games really popping off in China and places like that. The, I guess, first loot box like thing was the Gachapon ticket in the Japanese version of MapleStory in 2004. And that was more or less, buy a thing, get some random loot. Puzzles and Dragons came out in 2012.
Oh, yeah.
And that also included loot boxes. And as a result, became one of the highest grossing mobile games of all time. That was kind of the moment where I think a lot of people realized loot boxes could be a thing, is Puzzles and Dragons. They're like, oh.
You can actually look back then to symposiums I went to or little industry events, and that's when all the freaking little panels were how to monetize your game, monetizing like Puzzles and Dragons, monetizing like the Japanese do, monetizing.
What a fun
and
word
now
that
it's and now it's all like, okay, we live with this now. We're the frog in the boiling pot of water.
Yeah, no, the industry really did a good job of pulling that little trick off. Granted, it often does. But yeah, at the same time as all of that, roughly, I mean, all in like the kind of mid to late 2010s, you also had Valve launching cosmetics for Team Fortress 2 and like loot crates and that.
Hats.
So yeah, you had TF2, Counter-Strike, Dota 2, all of them embrace kind of similar models. TF2 also did something that I think is an underrated element of live service games, in that it was one of the first ones that really made big updates feel like events. TF2 had videos, they had special web pages for updates.
Like Meet the Soldier and shit like that.
Mm-hmm. And those things were great. I didn't even play TF2 at the time, and I loved those videos.
Oh, yeah,
I watched them all the time.
I never played, but yeah, that was
great.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, that was
exactly. But yeah, like those really, they took off in a big way. And I think that a lot of developers still follow that kind of model to this day, where they're like, big new event. We're going to have this big video. We're going to have like a streaming preview of all the content. We're going to have a special page for it. We're going to introduce you to everything. We're going to have like a written component with little like short stories. Riot does that a lot for League of Legends characters, that kind of thing. Speaking of League of Legends, that was kind of one of the final pieces of the puzzle. League of Legends was the game that really introduced the idea of like very regular, extremely frequent updates. So for a time, back in like 2009 and 2010, League of Legends, and I'd forgotten about this, they had a new hero like every other week. Like, can you imagine, compared to the update schedules of hero-based games now, a new hero every other week for like years?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure League of Legends just had one recently, and I was like, wow, that's surprising. I haven't seen a new hero in League of Legends for a while, but I think it just dropped like yesterday.
Yeah, no, they did release a new one very recently. And I mean, part of the reason why they update less frequently now is A, because they can afford to, but B, because they're very worried about balance. And if you're throwing a million different characters into a game, then you can't really balance it well. But that's also another idea that I think came about, or at least gained popularity because of live service games, is balance, the priority on it. I mean, like back in the day, people obviously cared about balance in like fighting games and stuff, but I don't think that they were as militantly about the idea of balance in multiplayer games as they are now. And I think part of that is due to these live service games where you have new elements coming in constantly. And so people are like, this one new thing threw everything out of whack. That's definitely the problem. And it's like, well, no, it's just like a big complicated game and people are discovering new things all the time. But I think that that's led people to like this idea that the ultimate sort of holy grail that all multiplayer live service games should be seeking is like complete perfect balance. And I think that's the worst idea in the world.
Balance isn't fun.
Yeah, balance is not fun. It's super not fun.
Yeah, but
and it just means stripping away all of like the possible unique elements of like characters and games in order to reach this idea of like perfect like fairness.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't exist.
I'm going to go ahead and blame esports on that because
I was thinking about that too. Yeah. About just this quest for balance is more not necessarily geared towards casual players like just you and I just popping in or whatever, but more towards that competitive aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has to be balanced, or like the players will get mad and shit like that. It was a big fucking deal in Overwatch with like Brigitte when she was first announced and stuff like that. Like it was so like such a thing that, you know, the Overwatch League like completely overhauled how they played or how, you know, players would play the game in Overwatch League games because they introduced role lock and shit like that because it was so imbalanced.
But yeah, so like what we kind of ultimately had was like a lot of the ideas of how to monetize various parts of games happened in the console world. And then the sort of like things that got monetized, like loot boxes and cosmetics and whatnot, evolved more on mobile and PC. Mm-hmm. And then these things kind of just like eventually had a head-on collision and all became kind of part of the same, I think, ecosystem. And so then that feeds into the modern day where you have things like Fortnite's insanely constant update schedule where there's new stuff like every week. And obviously there's a lot of crunch happening to make that happen. And yeah, like movie and pop culture tie-ins and crossovers, concerts. Fortnite especially is a platform unto itself. So much so that Epic used it to launch another platform, which is the Epic Store. But yeah, and so then that leads to this like expectation that games, regardless of size, need to keep up. Everything needs to be updating absolutely constantly at this just breakneck pace no one can really keep time with. For example, it's a game that I got into a while back called Spellbreak. Cool battle royale, interesting concepts.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Had some really good momentum out of the gate, but like can't update every week. And so like kind of, you know, lost a lot of interest, I think, which is a bummer. So where we are now is that, you know, every game has a bit of a service element, more or less. Even games that cost $60 include microtransactions and DLC. The sort of idea that I think back when these ideas first emerged would have been just laughed out of the room. Like, I'll never pay for, you know, $80 worth of DLC in a $60 game. Now it's like, I will do it without blinking. That's just life. That said, people are, to an extent, I think, getting sick of it all. But that's for another segment. Now it's time for a short break. And we are back. It is now time for our second segment, the tried and true crosstalk. We're playing the hits today.
Yeah.
In this segment, we are going to talk about specific service games and how they've kind of incorporated these ideas. Games that we've all played and enjoyed, but I think as a result of the way that they are structured, maybe also have misgivings with, because I think that's just a natural part of playing any of these games. So, to begin, Ash, your games.
I think the one service game that I struggle with is Destiny 2 because I don't get it yet. I mean, not to say nothing of like all the weird lore and the proper nouns, which I actually really like. Just the idea of like what the season passes do and how you access them, because I have constant MMO brain. I'm like, do I have to be max level? But there are no levels and I don't understand how any of this works. And I want to be in on it, but I just feel like there's this like big wall of like stuff that I either have to buy or I'm not sure that I have to buy that like keeps me out of the stuff that people love when they talk about Destiny 2. Like I haven't cracked it yet. And I haven't spent enough time with it yet to crack it, I guess. But I would like to, because it's interesting to me. And I had fun for the little bit of time that I was playing it, you know, with the guns and stuff like that and clicking through all the lore, because I'm a lore person. And it's not just shebang, it's also the stories too. So like, I don't know. I constantly struggle with Destiny and I think about it all the time, but I never hover and click play on it as much as I would like to.
Yeah, I think the ingenious thing about Destiny is that it feels really good to play. And so it's a game that can get away with a lot of other like really confusing bullshit. Because it's like, oh, but even though you're really confused about everything, you don't know how any of it works, and you will never figure out the story, you're still having fun.
Yeah.
So just, keep
It's
shooting
like
the
that,
guys.
yeah. And jumping and learning how to jump, because platforming is a very integral part of that game,
Yeah,
which I was not expecting.
My experience in Destiny 2 is that my mind has basically limited Destiny 2 to a single like level. I go down to Earth in the Cosmodrome area, and I go up to where that guy is, the guy with the great voice.
Yeah.
Who is?
I know who you're talking about. It's Fenris from Dragon Age. That voice actor.
Oh yeah, that voice actor.
Because it's all Dragon Age to me.
and I hang out with him, and that is all of Destiny 2 to me. I go down there, I hang out with him. I'll get a sniper rifle and I'll poke out the barrel out the windows and I'll fire down on some enemies every once in a while. But that's my whole Destiny experience, because I can't understand light levels, and I really love the shooting action. So I made a buddy, and he's an NPC. He's my boyfriend in game, and we hang out and have fun in that one area.
You can make boyfriends?
I've made my own narrative. He's my boyfriend. Oh. He talks about his other boyfriend every once in a while, his real in-game boyfriend.
Okay.
But he's just taunting me. It's a little playful thing we do. He makes me tea. That's all.
All right. So what is your service game of choice? What is your poison?
My poison. Well, it's I mean, I want to say World of Warcraft. I've been playing that for 15, 16 years now. I kind of want to say that because it is a game as service, as we defined in the first segment.
Well, I also think it's interesting in that World of Warcraft obviously had a huge influence on games as a service as a thing, but it didn't start out in kind of the modern model, but it evolved into the modern model or something more resembling it, because it had to keep up with all these other games. And so like, maybe you could talk a bit about how it's done that.
Well, what it's done is over the years, it's gotten a cash store. It's got some extra stuff in there. There's pet sales going on and mount sales. But really what's happened is it has taken... Okay, look at it this way. In 2007, they came out with the Burning Crusade, the first expansion for the game. The game had been running for 2.5 years at that point. Nothing in those 2.5 years. There were little updates here and there, but it was just like, okay, here's some new stuff for you to do. Just quietly rolling it out to the point where we are now, where the expansion comes out and then like, wait till you see what's coming out in patch blah, blah, blah 2 months down the line, because we know you're not going to want to freaking wait for that.
I wonder if like the earlier years where they padded out their time by making some of like the end game stuff so onerous to reach.
So
like
long and tedious. Are you talking about like faction, when you had to freaking do the faction grind? I remember.
Yeah, like all those things.
I had to kill furbolgs or owlbears or some damn thing. I was like, I just want to get this one magical thing that'll be completely useless in the new expansion, but I'm going to spend a year or months getting this thing.
No, but what they used to do is they used to time gate stuff. Like if you were crafting like the ultimate like armor set or whatever, like you could only craft so many mats a certain number of times during a week. So it would like artificially space it out because there wasn't anything to do. And I just have this memory of like crafting my Frozen Shadow Weave armor set. Yeah, I'm a fucking nerd. It's like I hold that as like a high achievement, because like that the way that the time dilation thing, it just doesn't exist anymore. Like you could just do whatever you want when you want it, And I just they would have to artificially like extend the amount of time you spend doing the end game stuff, because once you do get there, there's nothing there.
Well, let's take a hop backwards then to EverQuest. I mean, EverQuest, what they were doing at the time was like, okay, you need to get your epic legendary item for your bard. You're going to have to get one scale that drops off a dragon who shows up once a week.
Yeah, that shit.
Man. And then, what I loved about EverQuest back then is that people would intentionally like not let everybody else know how to kill those particular bosses. They'd be like, no, this is for me. So I'm not even going to tell you how to win. So then you will be disincentivized from taking my kill.
Yeah, you had people like that. Then you had people who were like, okay, he's going to be spawning in a minute now. Everyone, let's get coordinated. And then one asshole would come in and like, oh, hit him first. Yay, he's mine. Feel free to help me kill him. Ha ha ha. Wait, you're letting me die. It was a whole thing. And that was kind of a groovy meta back then because we had to make our own games up basically to get us through those times. And I'm sure back in like 2006, a lot of people stopped playing World of Warcraft while they were waiting for that new expansion. And they're like, yeah, we'll start giving your money again when you give us some new content. And that's why nowadays you've got like the big, the next big expansion isn't an expansion pack, but it's a patch. It's a named patch. And we've got some new stuff coming and it's in public test realm. You can try it out right now if you want. Anything to keep the money rolling in.
Right. Well, I mean, if the money wasn't rolling in, how could they afford to pay Bobby Kotick and no one else?
Right.
Exactly. How could they afford to hire the former director of the CIA?
Yeah.
I mean,
the CEO.
He was COO, wasn't he? Chief Operating Officer?
I wrote the article.
You wrote the damn story, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, more importantly, he was also Mike Pompeo's right-hand man and all sorts of fun stuff. Anyway, yeah, they hired that guy.
But my other games of service, let's skip around that because that's it for that's going to be it for our episode of evil people working for Activision. But no, the other game I'm playing is Avengers, which
God bless you for still keeping up with that shit.
It's so sad. Avengers, I think they want to pretend they're not a games as a service.
But they keep introducing more and more servicey elements. Like I saw recently, they're adding like Destiny style patrols. Yeah,
the patrols are a thing. In fact, who was it? One of the other sites wrote about it's becoming more like Destiny with these patrols, and I'm like, you're dreaming. There's no way it's going to be anything like Destiny. But good luck trying to get people out there running around together. Maybe it will help, maybe it won't. But I mean, what they've been doing is. And I hang out on the Reddit for Avengers as well, so I see everyone getting bored and sad. And everyone gets bored and sad within a week of new content coming out. And then they complain for a month or a month and a half or 2 months. Then more new content comes out. Everyone's excited for a couple days. And then they're sad again. And it's so sad. It really is to watch these people sticking with it because there's a good game somewhere underneath there if they can figure out what they want players to do.
It's an interesting thing that you brought that up, that there's a good game under there. And we were seeing this trend of games as a service that launch really poorly and take a very long time to get good. Destiny, the original, Final Fantasy XIV, the original, World of Warcraft to an extent. Is No Man's Sky a service?
When it came out. No Man's Sky is a weird one.
Yeah, because they don't charge for anything.
It's not updated around the clock or anything, but they keep updating it. And I think that it has like paved the way for a lot of other service games to be like, oh, we can launch kind of bare bones and then just, slowly but surely evolve into something people will like. But yeah, that's a strange one. I think the other thing that Fahey touched on that's interesting is that cycle of players being like, new content, yeah. And then 2 days later, there's nothing for me to do. This game is dead. Like, one of the worst things, in my opinion, to come out of service games is the concept of a quote-unquote dead game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because so many people are willing to declare a game dead after they've sunk 120 hours into it and are hitting the bottom of the barrel. And it's like, of course you are. You are like a hyper-dedicated Uber player. Normal people are not like you. They don't play that much. They probably have seen a third of the game at this point. But that kind of rhetoric does have an impact. A lot of people see that and they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to play it then. Or that also feeds into oh, the developers are so lazy, so let's harass them all the time. Those ideas are just really pernicious and shitty to me.
Well, if you look at Avengers, a lot of people talk about, I see a lot of people poking out the number of concurrent people playing it on Steam. And I'm like, yeah, there are not a lot of people playing it.
Nobody's playing on the Steam, though.
Well, no one's playing on Steam for one thing. But I mean, no one's playing right now. But the people who have played the game had a really damn good time with the game. And now you're making fun of it. I mean, I had a hell of a time with the first story mission in Avengers. And I wrote about it when it came out. I was like, this is great. I really love this. If it had stopped right there, I would have been like, oh man, yeah, I remember that fondly. But people forget that. Those first 20, 25 hours were a damn good time, but they're totally discounted, don't matter anymore. Because now people are saying that game's dead. And you're like, oh wait, but what about the good times? Fuck the good times. The game's dead now. It doesn't matter anymore. We're going to remember it as a failure game.
Well, I mean, also like back in the day, Avengers would have just been those first 20 or 25 hours. That would have been the whole game instead of like all these other unnecessary systems that don't really fit. And I'm sure at some point it was just going to be that game. And then some suits in Square Enix were like, oh, but have you seen what all these other games are doing? We need to add this system and that system and that system, because otherwise players will stop playing and spending money. And it's like, well, we just wanted to make like a single player game.
No.
But those are not in vogue right now.
Which brings us to our next point, which we might be able to cover in the next segment.
Well, wait, I didn't get to talk about any of the games.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are your service games, Nathan?
Wow.
I know.
This is Nathan Erasure.
Just so everyone knows, Ash is getting her first shot today.
I am.
And she's anxious to move on. So Ash is too busy thinking about her own self-preservation.
All the COVID antibodies.
Thinking about her own self-preservation and not video games. Some gamer you are.
Right.
Anyway, the one that I want to talk about, because it's like all I play right now, but I have a lot of really conflicted feelings about it, is Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is really, really good. From a world design standpoint, it rules. Like, it's very Breath of the Wildy, but also incorporates a lot of its own elements. But it has that like Nintendo magic to it of like you're just exploring and you think that you've seen all the world can offer you, and then you discover something totally new, some new kind of puzzle or some new idea, just like out of nowhere. And so it like constantly varies up the rhythm of like what you're finding and discovering, and you're just like, oh, that's so cool, or like I feel so smart for figuring that out, or like, it's just constant like micro level delights. But at the same time, it is very much a service game. It wants you to log in like every day. It has a lot of systems to encourage that.
Mm-hmm.
It has a pool gacha style system, so it wants you to spend money in order to unlock new characters via random rolls, basically loot boxes. And yeah, so like all of these elements, if you ignore them, the game is very relaxing, like incredibly relaxing. It's like the most just chill exploration game. You just wander around, you see cool things, you meet like charming characters. The game's writing is surprisingly good. If you ignore the main plot makes like no sense. But like moment to moment characters are like funny and enjoyable and good to spend time with. But yeah, like then you get into the gacha stuff. And I wrote about this yesterday, like about the sheer way that the game is at odds with itself in these regards. Like I'm just going to lazily read from my own article because like I wrote about the current ongoing event, which is known as the Windbloom Festival. And so like on one hand, it's really neat in that it encourages you, it wants you to log in every day, and it incentivizes that by having the event itself unlock over time. So you got to wait for some of it. But what that means is that in the meantime, it does feel like this event is ongoing and like characters are celebrating it in their own way. And so you're part of this like event that's actually happening in real time, as opposed to like an MMO event or like an Overwatch event where they just drop all the content in at once. And you're just like, okay, this is an event happening and I'm mostly going to ignore it because it doesn't really matter. Like in Genshin Impact, it feels more like part of the fiber of the game temporarily. And then it'll go away after a little bit, just like a real holiday. So it feels like a little holiday season where everyone's celebrating what is essentially a mixture of Valentine's Day and Oktoberfest. And that's really neat. And it incorporates all these NPCs you've met before. So you like did quests for them previously, but their lives went on and they reference things you did with them previously. And now they're doing these things. So it feels like the game world is constantly evolving and changing and is not static. It's all really well done. I enjoy that element of it a lot. But then like it also, again, wants you to log in constantly. It finds all these ways to incentivize that. It includes a special banner event so that one really rare character is less rare, so it wants you to spend more money. And like it really tries to get you to do that. And so yeah, like it has all these different systems that are like hey, I know you're relaxing and enjoying this game and you have all these like chill characters celebrating a holiday and there's like no big bad guy to deal with or worry about or anything, but also you should be freaking out about all these things that are available for only a limited time. And like you should be coming back constantly and making sure that this game is part of your daily schedule and like, you know, all these things that are just constant background stress in this game that is supposed to be super duper relaxing and chill. And it just like, yeah, it's a really bizarre combination. And so the kind of conclusion that I came to about all of this that I wrote in my piece yesterday, what I said is, it's heartbreaking that we've reached such a cutthroat point that games, from a structural standpoint, do not trust players to take a break and come back, and that both companies and communities have become complicit in the idea that individual games as be-all end-alls that provide everything for many while wringing every last cent out of a dedicated few. I can't imagine playing Genshin Impact the way that the developer seemingly wants me to play it, logging in every day, trying to collect every character, min-maxing my party, grinding endlessly while waiting impatiently for new content to arrive. That sort of uncomfortable urgency just feels so wrong in the face of a game that narratively understands the value of kicking back and seeing what the world brings to you. And like, yeah, I just, it's one of those things where on one hand, this game has embraced the idea of time passing to tell interesting and fun stories. But on the other hand, like, it still feels like it could do that without making you feel horrible half the time. And so, yeah, that's the bummer part. But the other thing is that, like, then my other example of a service game is like Warframe. And Warframe is a lot more generous about a lot of things than most service games. And it's also like a game that could only exist because of the service model. So what happened is that Warframe like came out and was fine. And then they just kept adding things to it and piling on systems that did not make any sense to add to like this kind of game. Like, I mean, it's a cooperative like shooter, and they're like, let's add fishing and like hoverboarding and like a bunch of other weird stuff that doesn't make any sense in this context, but somehow it works. And so like it's exactly the sum of its bizarre mismatched parts. And I love that. Game. I love that can exist. So yeah, the TLDR is I'm super conflicted on these kinds of games. I love them. In the past year, I've gotten really into a bunch of different service games, but at the same time, like, man, they are stressful and like exploitative and heartbreaking in a lot of ways.
Does Genshin get better once you hit multiplayer? Because I've been playing through on the PlayStation for ages and haven't quite gotten to the multiplayer portion yet.
So I haven't really been playing multiplayer, TBH. It just sort of like, you have to get past the first few hours. Like, then you start meeting more interesting characters. And like, I would say if you're not having a great time with it, just kind of ignore quests and just go explore for a little bit.
Okay.
The world itself is the main draw.
Yeah, and I've been trying to follow the quests and progress like that. Maybe it's time to wander a bit. Thank you, Nathan.
No problem.
I can't get into Genshin Impact. I want to. I like the art, but I don't know. It's just like every time I try, like, nah, this isn't for me. Well, which is weird because I play like mobile gacha games.
Yeah. I mean, it's gacha Breath of the Wild. Like, I recommend continue trying to get into it. That is my personal recommendation. Anyway, we should probably skedaddle on to our next segment. So let's do that. It's time for another break.
We'll be right back.
And we are back for today's last segment, which is called In the Headlines, because again, we're playing the hits. Today we are talking about kind of, again, keeping with the live service theme, the sort of, I think, slow recession of service as like the be-all, end-all pursuit of every video game. Because I think we are seeing kind of a slow backlash to it. And publishers and developers getting a little bit more brave about saying, actually, we don't need to do that. So, I mean, first of all, like, I want the two of you to travel all the way back to last year.
Yeah.
Think about the biggest games that came out last year, the ones that people talked about the most. What were they?
Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing. Those are the two biggest ones that stand out to me. It was Hades and Animal Crossing. What else did we do last year? Maybe Miles Morales. That one. Shit. I'm just gonna say Paper Mario, because I liked Paper Mario and it didn't get nearly enough love as it should have.
Yeah, you're getting close. There are a couple big ones you've omitted. One that we did 2 entire podcast episodes about.
Cyberpunk?
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
And
then one that we have talked about on here before. It features a bad dad who.
Oh, The Last of Us?
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
So now note that almost everything you just mentioned was like more or less a single player game.
Isn't that usually the case though? Like the big games are the single player games. They're big because we talk about them, because they're, the story or whatever, or the story around, them being made or whatever. But the bigger, quote unquote, bigger games that year are always your Call of Duties and your other service based games. Like we don't talk about them that much because they're kind of like there in the background. They're always doing shit, like your GTA Online and shit like that. Those are like the big, like the really, like, look at the chart big game.
Right. But at the same time, a lot of those games are like major publishers' attempted service elements. Like back in the day, you had Grand Theft Auto just coming out as a boxed game without a multiplayer mode, and they sort of added one over time, and it took on a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
And so then as a result of that, you had a lot of like people making single player games feel the need to add modes like that themselves. But what you'll note about things like Last of Us and Cyberpunk is that they don't have this like contrived service element. They just decided not to do it. Cyberpunk was eventually maybe going to do one, but they seem to be reconsidering that now. But yeah, like I think that last year you had a lot of games kind of eschew that model. Even before that, you had Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order do really well. And that's actually fed into so EA.
The Dragon Age news. Yeah.
EA is going to just go single player for the new Dragon Age, which came about as the result of a couple different. You can't see this because this is a podcast. But
thanking God.
Yeah, Ash is doing little prayer hands
for your bountiful gifts.
Yeah, it's single player, except you have to, every time you go into a romance scene, it broadcasts that automatically via Twitch.
Okay.
And like, yeah, with your like webcam on, so it sees you like reacting.
That's fine. I'd play the shit out of that.
Oh my
You
God.
know I would.
Oh.
Well, the future is going to be weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So like Dragon Age is going to be single player in part because Jedi Fallen Order sold really well, and EA was surprised by that, and they're like, oh, maybe these things still work. And also in part because Anthem bombed, because EA tried to do a big service game and it didn't work out at all, and they gave up on it recently. So I think you're seeing that in general, though, is that like one of the things about service games is they're theoretically forever games. You can only have so many popular forever games before people are like, well, I've got 1 or 2, so I don't need another. Also, Anthem, was very bare bones. And like, I think the idea underlying it is the same that a lot of service games have tried to embrace, which is we're going to come out, not going to have that much, and we're going to add more over time and hope people stick around for that. But increasingly, it seems like that doesn't work. That happened to Anthem, happened to Artifact from Valve.
Yep.
And so like you have games that still try that, like Fallout 76, I think benefited from doing that. Came out, didn't have a ton of stuff, wasn't really what people wanted it to be.
Its
but
bag sucked.
Hilariously, then kind of evolved into basically a single player game. Like
with a much better bag.
Right, of course. The bag is the important part. But no, like basically like added NPCs, added more standard quests. Just basically said like, oh, well, people don't want this to be a service game. What a shock. Let's make it.
But it's still a
less of
service
one.
game. Yeah.
It is. But it's one that is a lot more single player in nature. And a lot of people kind of play it solo.
I wonder if these games would be better or be received better if their publishers didn't need them to be so fucking wildly successful. I think there's a really good game in Anthem. I played it for a little bit and I really enjoyed like flying around in your suits and shit like that. There's something there. But because it's not like the big ass, successful ass thing I guess EA wanted it to be, it's going to get maybe not unfairly, just killed, just mercy killed. I don't know. I guess a lot of like we were talking about in the previous segment, a lot of these developers are like, okay, we can, even if we do it poorly, we have all these examples of other service games that were able to right the ship. And, you know, we are EA, we have $11 million. We can do that too. And it just didn't work.
I think what you're getting at here is that the biggest victim of all of service games is Iron Man. I'm going to explain this because both the Avengers game and Anthem, which was basically Iron Man Simulator,
yes,
just crashed and burned. Iron Man is the real victim here, and that is tragic.
Right. But one of the most lauded superhero games of the past couple of years, single player Iron Man VR. There you go.
You come full circle.
Oh.
Iron Man is...
Yeah, he's really doing well.
Iron Man's not a multiplayer game.
But yeah, so like, it's especially interesting because you had like EA back in 2010 saying single player games were finished, and now here they are making more of them. You also in 2011 had Gabe Newell saying that Portal 2 would be Valve's last isolated single player game experience.
That was a lie.
Alyx.
Yeah.
Yep, they made Half-Life Alyx last year, and they are making more single player games as we speak. So, tide is turning. Ultimate example is Cyberpunk, because on one hand, Cyberpunk came out as a single player focused game, but then, so on the flip side, it launched in a bare bones state and is now updating to be what it was supposed to be. So it's doing that thing too. And then like, maybe it's going to get a multiplayer component that's more servicey. Who knows? It's everything. It's nothing. It's Cyberpunk. On that note,
we promised not to talk about Cyberpunk again, but I think that statute of limitations is up. I think we can officially call that up.
No, actually, because we talked about Cyberpunk, we have to end the podcast now. That's the rules. It's like where in a movie, if somebody says the movie title, they immediately have to roll credits.
Sorry, I was already eating lunch.
Fahey's having lunch, apparently.
Mouth sounds. Now we really have to end the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, this is getting gnarly. All right. Well, anyway, that was Kotaku Split Screen. I hope you all had a great time. I'm Nathan Grayson saying bye. Ash, say bye to everyone.
Bye to everyone.
Fahey, do not say bye to anyone with your mouth full of sandwich.
Never.
Okay, well, that sounded better. Anyway, you are listening to Kotaku Split Screen Podcast. You can reach us via email at splitscreen@kotaku.com and on Twitter at Uncle Fahey, that's Fahey, at VAHN16, that's me, or at Astra, which is Ash. Our producer is Michaela Heck, and our sound engineer is Jamie Colazzo.
Thanks for listening.
Your backyard should be an oasis, not a challenge. And Steel has the tools to make it happen. From mowers and blowers to trimmers and more, the AK Homeowner series of battery tools starting at $199.99 has what you need to tackle a range of projects with the performance of battery power. Made by Steel. Real Steel. Find yours at steeldealers.com. All prices NES SRP, includes battery and charger.